The Business of Esports podcast is brought to you by G Fuel, the official energy drink of esports and the original energy formula of gaming. Visit them online at gfuel.com.
Welcome to the Business of Esports podcast, where we explore the intersection of business and esports, the fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation. Please welcome your hosts, Arda Okal, William Collis, and Paul Dawalibi. The Business of Esports podcast begins now.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast alongside Paul Dawalibi and William Collis. I'm Arda Okal. Thank you very much for joining us every single Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts. If you rate, review, and subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and a comment. It will help others find this podcast, whether they like business, esports, or the business of esports. Gentlemen, we have 1,000 news items to get to this week. So much happened. Many tournaments, many giant news items, many decisions. Paul, I want to ask you first, though. Did you catch any esports action this weekend?
I did.
What'd you watch?
Well, I watched CS, so I watched the major.
Okay. NC, right? Did you get your jersey?
I'm not an ENCE fan.
Oh, you're not an ENCE fan.
I'm not an ENCE fan.
Okay.
And in fact, my picks in CS, because you can do the pick 'em. I had picked Astralis to win it all.
Wow, what a pick!
So the
Wow.
the
Good for you.
genius that I am. But I was pulling for them because obviously I like the idea of a dynasty, right? Dynasties are kind of fun to see in sports, and I think Astralis at least is the closest thing we've come to that in recent history.
William, check out anything this weekend?
Guys, I got to be honest with you. I didn't get a chance to watch much, but I tuned into a little bit of the major, because I think you can't miss a big CSGO tournament.
Exactly.
But I missed the finals, which broke my heart. I missed the finals, and it broke my heart. So I'm like watching them on, YouTube, but it's just not the same. There's no energy. So hot tip to listeners, if there's a big tournament on, make sure you're not suffering away on replay.
By the way, a hot tip for our listeners as well. It's pronounced Katowice, just so people know. Now we know. We're going to get to that a little bit later on, though. Let's start with this because we do have a big Business of Esports story to start with. In fact, it is being labeled as the very first esports IPO. The esports community and content platform Super League Gaming had its IPO in the last week. The shares are sliding a little bit, but the company sold more than 2.27 million shares for nearly $25 million. Initially, it was priced at $11 a share. It fell in the first day to about $8.50. Now it's hovering around the $9.30 mark. So when you look at this, when you track this, Paul, let's start with you here. What do you make of this initial public offering and for this company to be essentially the first one to have an IPO like this in the world of esports?
I think this was whoever put money in Super League Gaming at their IPO deserves to lose their money. This is literally one of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire career, in the history of all the years I worked in finance. This was a company that went public with less than $1 million of revenue, less than $1 million of revenue, and tried to raise $25 million, which they did successfully. And the market cap's hovering now around 80 million, but I think when at their IPO price, it would have put the company at $100 million market cap. We're talking a sub $1 million revenue company having a valuation of $100 million. How is this not, I won't say it's fraud, but how is this not utter stupidity on the part of whoever put money in this company at their IPO? This is exactly what I'm afraid of as esports gets popular. This is people taking advantage of the current hotness and expecting money to come pouring in just because it's hot and ignoring the fundamentals of these businesses, which are not that good. There's no, if I was producing ball bearings and I tried to go public at this kind of valuation with this kind of story, they'd laugh me out of town.
But wouldn't you say that the people behind Super League Gaming, in fact, are geniuses capitalizing on this and making the money that they did?
No. The geniuses are the investment bankers. The geniuses are the existing investors who got out because some retail investor paid ridiculous dollars for his share. This is the people who were geniuses. It's the investment bankers and any existing investors who got out at this IPO price.
Look, guys, I mean, credit where credit is due. They do, regardless of how it turns out. This was the first esports IPO. That's significant. That's a milestone. I could not agree with Paul more. I think this business is, I'm not even clear what their business model is, very honestly. Like,
they're an esports community and content platform.
Yeah, but like, how do they monetize? I'm not sure. Like, they organize tournaments in movie theaters, but it doesn't seem like people really show up or buy tickets. If there's ticket revenue, it's very low. The movie theater owners don't really pay them very much. Like, it's just, there's nothing really here under the hood, but I do think, look, all credit to them for realizing that the heat of esports would allow them to get an exit when they probably could not have capitalized this thing further on the private market. Let's just hope the overhang isn't so bad that the next time a real esports company goes public, there's headwinds against offering for a legitimate business model.
So let's talk about
here's the good news.
Okay.
Here's the good news. Other esports companies will go public in much the same way before this thing blows up, and it will inevitably blow up. I mean, the fundamentals are just that bad. The question for you, William, is could I have gone and built this business for less than $100 million?
Oh, yeah. I honestly, I think you could build, if that's really the valuation for a $1 million revenue company organizing some loose community content and esports events, you could go build that for $500,000 today and have a credible competitor up to them in 6 months. I mean, there's no barrier, there's no tech. I'm unclear what's proprietary about this business. So yes, it's insane. It's simply the fact that, to your point, retail investors don't have another way to access esports right now, and they're flowing in because of the heat.
Look, the market cap today, I think, is 77 million as of when we filming this podcast. But I think when they went public at the valuation that they did, the company would have had about $100 million market cap. So this to me, I'm scared of this. This terrifies me.
Why?
Because I just see so many people getting suckered into this kind of investment. And when you see the CEO doing like CNBC and all these shows and saying, hey, we're the first esports IPO and this is so exciting. I mean, this terrifies me.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why hasn't as you guys would label it, truly endemic esports organization not gone public until now?
The reality is the fundamentals for most esports businesses are not there.
Yeah,
for most of these companies, revenue is significantly trailing valuations. That's the reality of the esports industry today. And so most of them, I think, would have never even considered an IPO because up until now, this kind of IPO with these kinds of numbers was not possible. Just not possible.
I just fail to see how there wouldn't have been one business person that had known the esports landscape that could have done what Super League Gaming just did.
I mean, maybe it's remiss and Cloud9 should have had better bankers. They could have done their last funding round on, the public market as opposed to the private. I don't know. But I definitely think the statement Paul is making is very true, is esports, a lot of the values in esports are predicated on the assumption that this market is going to look like traditional sports in terms of eyeballs, sponsorship dollars, etc. Some of the things like eyeballs are already there. Other elements of the business or the business landscape, like sponsorship dollars, significantly trail. And so you need patient capital, and that comes from private investors, not public markets.
But the last question before we move on from this topic, what will 2019 look like in terms of IPOs in the esports landscape?
Business of Esports podcast. We're announcing in April, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sub $1 million in revenue, but we're looking for $100 million valuation.
Totally.
It's a very exciting story. I think everyone should really get on board.
What's our initial price? $350 a share?
It's whatever.
350
gaming
I should
was
say.
Times 100%. No, but seriously,
we're going to hear more announcements. What are we going to hear?
My prediction is you're going to see a team go to the public markets, particularly after this year. There's been such a spike in team funding. I mean, just recently, G2 Esports raised $17.3 million in their Series A, right? That's just one of the $15 to $20 million capital rounds injected in EULCS and NALCS teams in the last 8 months, right? There are other organizations in esports that are arguably more credible than G2 that have yet to receive a big funding backing. And I think after this, you're seeing, wow, I can dip into public market capital. I can get a crazy valuation, far better than I would get in the private market. And if it really is esports fervor, there's nothing people love to own more than the underlying teams themselves. And there's proven models for public team ownership in like the Premiership League in England. You're going to see a major team go to the public markets now. And I'd say November, 6 months from now, get ready, guys. It's on.
I think I agree with William there, but I think all of this is predicated on ignorance. Ignorance on behalf of the investors who are going to get burned on many of these, and ignorance on behalf of many of the people running the businesses who think going public is some kind of freebie. And the reality of running a public company is very different from the reality of running a private business. And so I worry that many are going to get burned on both sides of the equation.
If you want to continue this conversation, join us on Twitter at Biz Esports. And also, if there are any topics that we don't get to, feel free to yell at us. We will get to them on the next podcast. Speaking of teams, let's move on to Team Liquid, who has now signed a deal with Twitch for that platform to become the team's exclusive sponsorship sales representative. Big news, already exclusive to Twitch in terms of broadcast rights, but now Twitch will handle all brand connections and sales for Team Liquid. So this seems like this is a complete paradigm shifter, a complete game changer. William, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think this is arguably the biggest piece of esports news this year. I mean, literally, I might put this above the Apex Legends launch because it really is a new business model for Twitch. It's moving Twitch out of just being piping and sort of a broadcasting service into a talent management agency. And it's a significant synergy between teams who hate selling sponsorships like this. It's big, it's time consuming, it's expensive. Now they can go through an aggregator channel like Twitch, which can get them better rates, broader relationships, and halo these types of sponsorship deals and partnerships across multiple organizations. It also, interestingly in my mind, I'd be curious what Paul says about this, starts to move Twitch into competition with the leagues a little bit, right? Because what was the value of the Overwatch League? Well, it's bringing the league level sponsors to their teams. Well, now if I'm interested in accessing those larger scale sponsorship deals, there might be another model for this. I could go through the broadcasters themselves. And I think that, it's a really exciting opportunity for Twitch. And AAA, this is the smartest move. It cements my opinion that Team Liquid is the best managed esports team in the market today, the most forward thinking. I think this is wonderful for them, wonderful for Twitch. But it also, in my mind, foretells a little bit of conflict down the line, and potentially very meaningful conflict as the tournament organizers and the tournament structures fight with the broadcasters for control of the pie.
To be honest, William, I don't see conflict here. I see the Jeff Bezos playbook at work. And I would never bet against the guy, right? Twitch is owned by Amazon. I see a play here where they understand what they've got. So they have this broadcast platform, this streaming platform. So they own the eyeballs. But I see a future where now they'll own the sponsors. They'll own the teams, essentially, not actually own them, but a team's value really is the value of its sponsor. So in that way, if you're the middleman there, you own the team. And it's not crazy to think at some point Amazon will say, let's own the publishers too. And then what happens, right? Well, you've got Amazon now and Twitch being the organizer, the publisher, driving all the sponsorship, controlling the teams, essentially.
Well, first of all, Amazon sort of already is looking at being a publisher, right? They have a lumberyard in their games development activities. But second of all, I really see this as in conflict. I see events like Twitch Rivals, that's organizing tournament structures to draw eyeballs, that's creating reasons to come to the platform, just like Overwatch League is a reason to come to the platform. And I think when I think of the value that the Overwatch League's bringing, one of the principal values, and if you bought a team franchise, one of the principal things you were going to receive back was rights and share of the league level sponsorships. That was a big reason to cut a check. Well, what happens when Twitch wants to cut an exclusive beverage deal with G Fuel? And if you haven't checked out our last podcast, you can hear the thoughts of G Fuel CEO
Nicely
Cliff.
done.
Yeah, I'm learning from Arda, just backlinking our content. Seriously, the last episode we did was amazing, so check it out. And, the league organizer wants to do a deal with Coke. Who wins in that situation? And by the way, who really wins when you also have Twitch organizing their own competitive content and looking at going deeper in there? And clearly Twitch Rivals is a program they are significantly expanding. I foresee, you're right, this is vertical integration. This is the Amazon playbook. I just foresee it moving them into, this is just another way in which there's going to be direct conflict and friction between the two most parts of our ecosystem today, the people who make the games and the people who help us watch those games being played.
Let me ask you this question. Will this move perpetually cement Twitch as number one in the market for years to come? And or will this also allow opportunities for other platforms to thrive, because there will be a lot of upset content creators that say, actually, I don't like this arrangement. It doesn't work for me. Maybe those who are sort of the middle class of the streamer realm, as opposed to the big fish and maybe the smaller fish that get this sort of halo effect, like you said, that now will want to look at a caffeine or a mixer.
No, I think this is the most significant move Twitch has made in the last couple of years. It really cements not only their dominance as a streaming platform, but by owning the sponsorship side of the equation, they have to be the go-between for anyone who wants to play in the space. People need to realize that the sponsorship dollars power esports at every level, right? It's the primary revenue stream for everything that's happening here. And if you control that conduit, if you're the guy standing at the gate, it becomes really hard to compete with them on any level. And if Twitch does manage, call it this perfect vertical integration, you get the equivalent of, the Empire in Star Wars, right? Whether you like it or not, they will have full control over everything that happens. And they will decide if the conflict suits them or not.
I can play a little bit of devil's advocate here, Paul, and I can make an argument that Twitch's thinking is not as deep as we're giving them credit for. I don't think it's true, but let me make that argument. I can see a world where this decision is motivated more simply by Twitch. How does Twitch make money today? Ad revenues. What's a great way to get around paying Twitch's very high CPM, going directly to the influencers themselves, right? And inserting your ads with product placement sponsorship directly into the broadcasts, right? It is a cheaper way to go if you can access the talent, and it's more effective and more direct because you have the streamer themselves directly promoting it. So you could see this as just a defensive play on Twitch's behalf to lock up the ad inventory that's living on their platform. Again, I don't think it's the case. I think it's much more seismic, but that's a real ramification, a real benefit for them. And you could, in a less well-managed company, I might believe that was the thinking and they'd stumbled into the larger opportunity.
Is this going to happen with is this going to be the norm now for the future? Any content creator that does anything on Twitch, they're going to handle all sponsorships. And what happens to integrations within your videos? Then what?
I think Twitch will provide them with that kind of solution. But if an organization as large as Liquid, as well funded as Liquid, is handing this off to Twitch, you can imagine smaller players that don't have sales forces and resources to go do this themselves will very happily hand it off to Twitch. The scarier repercussion here is this highlights just how slow and backwards YouTube has been in this space. They've had no answer for literally anything Twitch has done. For literally anything. And they're losing the streaming game faster than they realize. There's just no one at the wheel at YouTube.
But is this going to happen for gaming content only with Twitch, or do you really feel like other non-gaming content will take advantage of this and move to Twitch?
Look, I don't think Twitch is going to become YouTube. What I'm comparing here is really Twitch on the gaming side or semi-gaming side gaming. And YouTube gaming. And there they are failing miserably.
I don't know what you're talking about. I watch everything on, was it YouTube Red there? They've like rebranded that offering like 30 times. I don't even know what it is. But yeah, I think YouTube still, I agree with you. They are woefully on the back foot here, and they've been on the back foot for the last, basically as long as I can remember, since there was a foot to be on the back off, right? But I still think YouTube could turn this around, because the fact remains Twitch is very bad at one thing: archived content. Let's go back to the beginning of this podcast where I was saying, I missed watching the Katowice, CSGO tournament. Well, where did I watch it? On YouTube, right? Remnant to date, YouTube still owns the remnant inventory, the legacy inventory. It's still the place you go to watch content that's not live. Now, that's less valuable content, but that's a very, very meaningful slice of esports entertainment that they have a strong hold on. And again, I think they could very easily, YouTube could have very easily, after I'd watched those highlights, say, hey, William, do you know that there's a CSGO streamer live right now who is competing in Katowice? Do you want to go watch them? They could very easily become a very credible threat in live streaming if they would do something sensible around it. So I wouldn't write them out. I just, again, characterize this as a way that YouTube is just refusing to really engage or realize the value of this space.
To me, I guarantee you YouTube gaming, and I know they don't even call it that anymore, but YouTube gaming will fail to compete with Twitch in the long run because the leadership there is more interested in posing with pictures with Ninja than actually running and building their business and competing with Twitch. That's my primary belief. The leadership just doesn't see the big picture the same way Twitch is seeing it.
Does YouTube need gaming?
But the perception is really what's scary here, right? You have creators on YouTube getting demonetized, gaming creators included, right? Where the YouTube's removing ads and the sponsors are running away, and you have this like direct comparison with Twitch where not only is advertising working on Twitch, but now Twitch is telling you, hey, we're going to go get advertisers for you, right? You see the dichotomy here and how that perception is an ugly one for YouTube.
But that would work for Team Liquid because they are a giant brand. But I wonder how this is going to work for entities and content creators who are not as big as Team Liquid.
But it's going to be so, if Twitch, look, they're going to test it with the big brands, but it's going to be so easy for them to do bundling, right? They're going to be able to go to future sponsors. They're going to say, you can, here, buy our A-list package and you can get in with, these 10 top orgs, these 20 middle tier orgs, and these 50, bottom tier orgs. It'll be so easy. And by the way, guys, as somebody who runs a pro esports team with Team Genji, right, I can tell you, the most painful part of our job is selling and finding sponsors. It's something that could be standardized. It could be done through a scale platform play. There's nothing particularly special about us doing it. It's a ton of resources for us to find and court and inform those people. And candidly, it's not particularly synergistic with being a good pro team, right? Like convincing, Razer or Logitech to write you a check every month really has nothing to do with managing esports talent and positioning them to do well in competition. So this is just the perfect thing. I mean, if Twitch called me up, and hint, Twitch, you should please call me up. If they called me up tomorrow and said, hey, we can take care of all of your sponsorship needs with a turnkey solution, I think every organization would be thrilled to write it out, right? There's not really a benefit. And by the way, this is everywhere. You see every individual celebrity has an agent for a reason, right? This is just Twitch acting as an agent for orgs, just like, by the way, they're going to start to act as an agent for the individual streamers too.
But this is the broadcaster becoming the exclusive agent, which is new. Like a sports team doesn't necessarily give all of their sponsorship opportunities to their broadcaster.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And at some point, this is part of the cycle of the market maturing. Right. At some point, when things have stabilized and everybody has enough sponsors to go around, there will be a reemergence of these middleman organizations that can drive that additional wedge of value. That will happen. But that's not where we are right now in the market. Right now, the challenge for most teams is getting enough sponsors, maximizing their sponsorship pie, not extracting the last little piece of value from each and every category, right? I feel like this is a wonderful place for Twitch to be, and it's going to be a wonderful place to be for the foreseeable future.
Well, we're definitely going to track this topic on future episodes of the Business of Esports. Let's move on to the event that Paul watched live, you watched archived on a different platform. I was in and out of it all weekend. CSGO won the weekend. IEM Katowice won the weekend in terms of viewership and overall buzz in esports. It hit over 1 million concurrent views over the weekend. There was lots of drama. We talked about it. ENCE making it all the way to the finals. We got a dynasty with Astralis. So there was a lot of great talking points coming out of that tournament. Many people noted throughout the weekend that CSGO, from a viewership standpoint, is the best esport to watch still today, even for a game that was released in 2012. So that got me thinking, and this is what I want to bring this conversation forward here on this podcast, is we've talked a lot about, you've made the point, Paul, about characters, and even going so far as to say I would put characters on my team over building the best possible winning team. And so I was just thinking of the different factors that go into a successful esport presentation. The characters, like you said, the watchability of the game, the money, the prize pool, the eyeballs, the interest of the game itself, casual versus esports. I'm thinking what factors are truly the most important factors in order for an esport to be successful, because as much fanfare as CSGO received this weekend, we still don't talk about it as much as we do other titles on the scene.
Did you watch any of it, Arda?
I did, yes.
It really is the most fun esport to watch. And that's, to me, amazing. It's incredible that a game that old, right, in game terms, is still the most fun game to watch as an esport. And so much of it has to do with every round of CS has the opportunity for drama. And drama creates entertainment. It gets people on the edge of their seats. It keeps you watching. It's that drama that drives, I think, the excitement around CS. CS is also great at highlighting the individual characters, because you can carry in CS, right? If you pull off an amazing round, right, and you get a 3-kill or a 4-kill or something crazy, right, or you solo defense a point B in whatever map, right? Like, if it allows for one individual star to carry, Overwatch League, as contrast, will never have that. We'll never have that. It's so much of a team game. You can't individually carry in Overwatch. The current meta makes for rounds that have zero drama because you know exactly what everyone's doing when everyone's playing. And they're all clinical. Like, there's no, other than Defran, and arguably that's the only thing people are talking about when it comes to Overwatch League, there's no drama and there's no personality in it compared to CS. And CS gets this so right. They do everything that Overwatch League is doing right from a production value standpoint. That's an easy check mark. But the game itself is so well built for the viewer, so easy to understand, and so dramatic to follow that inevitably it's going to succeed. And my view is, I don't see CS slowing down. I really don't. I think as the PC gaming scene expands, people will rediscover the game or discover it for the first time.
So I have sort of two thoughts here. First of all, I think CSGO is such a great and such a watchable game for a slightly different reason than Paul's outlining. I think it's because it is literally the most intuitive esport. If you've ever watched an action movie, right? If you've ever played Cops and Robbers as a kid, right? You basically get what's happening in CSGO. It's people with guns trying to shoot each other, and it's a realistic game. It's one shot, one kill. It is so easy to follow precisely because there aren't really many special rules, right? There's no teleporting tracers or shielding Winstons, right? For my Overwatch references there. This is a game that's immediately gettable, and you immediately understand the stakes. It makes it so much easy. It is the only esport that you can know nothing about and actually watch around and have fun. Now, granted, if you get really good at CSGO and you realize there's pixel-perfect bomb throws to smoke site A at just the right angle and things like that, there's a lot more under the hood for the informed viewer, but a casual viewer can perfectly appreciate it. So I think that's really the secret to the CSGO viewership, is just it's really the only esport that we've been primed to understand in our existing daily life.
So yes, it is a universally regarded best esport to watch, right? It despite the fact that it was released many years ago, but it is not the most popular esport. So I wonder how much of a factor is watchability, because we've said on this podcast before that Fortnite is oftentimes difficult to watch as an esport, but it has among the biggest prize money in all of esports, and it has a lot of viewers when there are tournaments happening. So what factors really, truly amount to the top of the mountain in terms of esports?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wish I had a snap answer for you here. I think it's a cocktail of factors, right? I think ideally you want to be good at everything. I do think, given how the dollars are flowing into the esports scene today, watchability, which literally did not matter 10 years ago because the only people who cared about esports were the people playing them, right? Watchability has now become very, very important. And in fact, games are now being designed with an idea towards watchability. I think the playability piece of a game, it has to be playable enough that people can have casual experiences with it to be able to understand what they are watching. Because again, what we've mentioned is that esports, or what I've argued is that esports are non-intuitive to view. If you haven't played the game or had some prior experience, it's difficult to appreciate what's being produced. And I think they need to be deep enough to support a vibrant pro scene. But I do think the importance of gameplay is receding a little bit. At least in sort of that middle level relative to a great viewership experience. And I think that's sort of the fundamental tension here, why you can see a 12-year-old game like CSGO knocking everything out of the park, while a newer game like Overwatch can sometimes struggle. I don't want to throw us totally for a loop here. I just am stunned. Like, I feel like the esports market's vacillating. We just had Apex Legends, which was the hottest thing in the world, which is the newest game. And now we're talking about literally, arguably the oldest competitive shooter that still has a vibrant scene. It's incredible to me how this market shifts.
But guys, don't you think this is interesting that we're even talking about CS, in the sense that I think the reason we're discussing it, and Arda, correct me if I'm wrong, is there was quite a bit of buzz online in social after the major, with people expressing the same opinion, which is
yes,
CS is the best esport ever, right? And why all of a sudden are these people having epiphanies? Why weren't we seeing that after the last major? And part of me, the cynical me, wants to believe that the state of other esports, namely Overwatch League, are so bad that in comparison, when you're watching CS, it's refreshing. And all of a sudden people are going, man, this old girlfriend, she was, I did love her. But like,
it would be like,
are we rediscovering an old flame because the new flame is maybe beating us up a bit?
It's like when a sport has a lockout or a strike, and suddenly you discover something else that fills that void. So you're saying there was a void among esports viewers for that level of competition and drama, and CS:GO, this tournament in Katowice happened to come at the right time?
I think it's because Overwatch, even though the viewership has been consistent and maybe even up compared to last year, has just been so bad. Like the viewer experience for Overwatch League has been so bad that in comparison, people are going, wow, this CS thing is actually pretty entertaining.
But the thing is that so we're now putting that into the shooter FPS category, right? Because there are other esports that are very fun to watch. Rocket League is very fun to watch. It's extremely fun to watch, but it's not getting the same buzz, but it also didn't have a major tournament this past weekend.
I think shooters are always going to be compared against shooter, right? Sure. If I'm a shooter guy, I watch shooter esports typically. And so, if I had been watching Overwatch League for the first 2 weeks and all of a sudden the CS major comes along and I'm going, man, why was I watching Overwatch League? Like, this is fun.
So do you think people are gonna now quit Overwatch League?
No. So where does it's kind of the only game in town when it comes to shooters, other than the occasional major in CS or tournament in CS, right? Like, what is there otherwise?
Let's end on this. Do you think CSGO gets a bump in terms of esports as a result of what happened this past weekend? Are more people who just discovered, like you said, are going to care now? Suddenly, we're going to see more top of the line winning Twitch on the weekends.
CS is going to be steady for a long time. It's the one that will not go away, I think.
I think it's a great template for other esports. I do think this bump is a little flavor of the month, right? And this is a little heresy for esports, but I think we like to watch something fresh, right? We're rotating through. We've just come through a big period of Battle Royale. Now we're going to a much more clinical, much more subdued, much more realistic team shooter. It's fresh. And what matters is it had a chance to flare back, because this is a particularly watchable game with a lot to teach a new generation of games. But I also think this doesn't do anything long-term for the CSGO scene. It's going to be a slow, steady, old faithful alliance, just like hockey.
Let's go to this topic here. This might be our last topic, depending on how much time we have left here. Shroud had some comments here responding to criticism of sponsored streams. Actually, we were just talking about sponsorship in Twitch. So here's what he had to say regarding this. It's really cool to see all the sponsored content happening, It's only getting bigger in terms of people trying to sponsor streamers and YouTubers that do it. So more and more streamers doing sponsored streams, Shroud claimed, would lead to less people calling those who do sellouts. It's really cool. Quote, it's really cool. 1, because obviously you get paid. And 2, the more that it happens, the less people are going to be like, wow, sellout, wow, this, So me personally, I do not subscribe to the whole sellout thing at all. I don't. I think that obviously, the reason that you're doing this and investing so much time in grinding is because you want to be paid. I think it's absolutely silly that anyone would label anyone a sellout. It's like, oh, my favorite band got signed to a big label. You should be happy for them because now they can do this full time. So I don't believe in the whole sellout thing at all. I think that it's ridiculous that people would even think that it's more a personal thing. Like, oh, my band is liked by many other people now, so I can't like them. I think that's silly. But I feel like this is interesting because this is still a prevalent thought in esports, but even esports as a whole, because I do get that vibe whenever you go to, even within the communities, that you go to different esports events, and sometimes people are very protective of their communities.
Yeah, one day we'll call it the ninja effect. It'll be ninjaing, not selling out, right? No. Look,
Good for ninja.
I agree. I tend to agree that I don't see it as selling out, but I think the genius of Shroud's comment is that selling out is somewhat transitory, right? In the sense that today there are people who consider it selling out, but once everyone's doing it, it's no longer selling out. And at some point that will happen, right? Like today it might be just 2 or 3 streamers who do big sponsored streams, but at some point we'll see 200 or 300, and you won't be able to say those guys are selling out. Everyone's doing it.
Nobody's watching, Modern Family on ABC and saying, "Oh, this show's such a sellout. They have commercials in it."
Yeah, because
that's
there've
the
been
reality of the
hundreds
landscape.
and thousands of sitcoms previous to it.
Right.
And this needs to have, I do think there's going to be a particularly strong backlash against quote unquote selling out in esports. And I totally agree with you, Arda. It's ridiculous. I mean, people have to eat, right? But I think the backlash is coming from the fact that, look, there is a fundamental relatability to a lot of the streamers you see as being successful, right? I think a lot of the people who watch them, who view them, engage with them, sort of imagine that they could get there, right? That if they played the game more, hey, they're pretty good. They think they have a great personality. Their friends think they're funny. If they put in the time to stream, I think there's an illusion of accessibility still in the space today. And that triggers feelings of jealousy. Let's be honest. It does. And when you start to see people, there's money involved. When you see, Shroud hawking his Coca-Cola or whatever it is, and that's not you, you're not getting that paycheck, it's going to trigger something. And so I do think we're going to go through a little painful period in this space where it has to be the new norm. It's going to become standardized. It looks like maybe Twitch might even standardize it for us. But the viewership base is still such that it's not going to be a pure benefit to them. It's going to trigger negative feelings that they're going to express, because we all know gamers love to express negative feelings. #BizEsports.
It's interesting, William, because your theory, basically the conclusion of your theory is that the more relatable you are as a streamer or esports star, the more likely you are to get backlash as a sellout.
Yes.
And if you're like a machine and mechanically perfect and are an aim god and all these things, then you're less likely to be called a sellout because people can't go, hey, I could be that guy.
Let me put it a different way. If Dr. Disrespect pulls out his Dollar Shave Club razor and goes, "Oh, gotta give the stash a clean cut," you're not going to perceive it the same way as
that
if
was a terrific impression.
Yeah.
Just well done. Nailed it.
That was wow, guys. By the way, check out my stream if you want to see more.
William Collis, available for impersonation gigs.
Yeah. Whereas if Ninja says, "Hey guys, try my new Hot Topic blue hair gel. I love Hot Topic. It is the best. I buy all my hair gel at Hot." Is Hot Topic even around, by the way?
I don't know.
Massively
Yes.
myself.
Hot Topic is still a thing.
It's perceived differently. I think it's fundamentally a different feeling.
It's an interesting theory. I think you're probably right, but then that means there are some stars who are going to get a lot of flack, probably unfairly, just because they're more relatable.
That's the case. Yeah, but that's the case for any celebrity. The more relatable you seem, the more likely you will attract vitriol, simply because people feel like it will A, get to you and the attention will be responded to, or B, because you seem like a lower hanging fruit in terms of a target.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is going to be when there is this backlash, who is the new class of streamer that's going to come out that's going to define themselves by owning the backlash and being known as the person we love to hate, right? Like maybe the Kardashians aren't the right thing to use here. I don't quite know, but something like that's sort of painful to watch, and we all sort of judge it a little bit, but it's in the cultural zeitgeist and it's very effective. I think we're going to see that class of streamer pop out too, and it's going to be really interesting when we have that reality TV effect defining another generation of celebrity.
Why don't we move on to another topic here? This one is very interesting to me. I know that we've gotten some comments about needing to talk about the fighting game community a little bit more on the business of esports. Well, this one's for you, FGC. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We promise that we will endeavor to find more stories encompassing all of esports. Yes, we have been a little bit of FPS heavy on this podcast, but we definitely, that is not by design. So we will definitely branch out and find the biggest stories in the world of esports. So I'm just making that promise here so that people don't feel like they're being alienated.
Yeah, if anybody's listening, every podcast I'm submitting Magic Arena stories and Hearthstone stories. Believe you me, guys, those are my games.
The lowest hanging fruit for vitriol on this podcast is William. Let's just make that clear.
I am the Cardassian in the business of esports.
So there will be weekly fighting game tournaments at Walmart. We did talk about the initial story on a previous podcast, which you can find on our archives. William, thank you for the segue inspiration there. They, Allied Esports Arena and Walmart are putting together physical locations for streaming and tournament capacity in Walmart stores. I believe it will start with 5 or 6 with the possibility to branch out. We could see a world where every single Walmart has a sort of esports area where tournaments and streams can happen. Now, a weekly fighting game tournament, this is from the Esports Observer, will happen on Wednesday nights. It will be called Wednesday Night Fights. It will be a weekly tournament brand that will expand to 5 Walmart locations. These Walmarts each have a dedicated esports space operated by Esports Arena. Level Up and Esports Arena have also partnered with NBC to host a televised tournament in March. So the two organizations have partnered with Capcom and NBC to organize a Street Fighter event called Saturday Night Fight on March 9th, consisting of multiple events. The final event will be a 5-on-5 rivalry exhibition between top players in Northern and Southern California, which will be televised on NBC. Since 2017, Street Fighter has been televised across ESPN2, Disney XD, TBS, and now NBC. So I think it's a very interesting choice that the fighting game, that Street Fighter and the fighting game community be the one to spearhead this partnership. I think that it was also a very good choice, because I think Street Fighter is a game that resonates with more than just the esports audience. I think it's a casual enough title that people remember, whether you grew up playing Street Fighter 2 like myself or just picking up the new games. I think that Street Fighter has enough of a name brand recognition. And I also feel that the 1v1 helps a lot because people will just come in and play, and the tournaments are there. The scene is there. So to me, this was a great choice.
Yeah, you don't need a team. You don't really need anything. You just walk into your local Walmart and compete. And anyone watching, even anyone shopping there, doesn't need to be explained what's going on, right? You could pass by and watch and enjoy, and they've got you sort of without even trying. I think what's interesting is from a business standpoint for Walmart, this is also the easiest way to push, call it more budget product, right? Like if you had an Overwatch League style tournament inside of Walmart, it's hard to go sell $2,000 PCs to the people there. But if you're watching Street Fighter, it's not that hard to go sell someone a $200 or $300 console. And so I think it will drive more sales within their gaming category because it's just more accessible from a cost standpoint, from a viewership standpoint, from sort of every angle. It's just more accessible.
So ultimately, you think this is more of a marketing expense than anything, or do you think this is because we see this a lot, right? Esports being used as a marketing, a line in the marketing budget as opposed to its own entity.
I think this is no different than Walmart putting paper towels at a deep discount, hoping people come in to buy the paper towels and end up walking out with 10 other things.
I have a little different perspective on this just because of sort of my background with Hasbro and, having worked with retailers. I think it comes down to the fact that, look, these digital products like games are actually relatively difficult to sell and showcase in aisle, right? They're not like a toy where you see it in the, in the package. There's a little try me button that you can click and have the lights flash and get what's going on. You actually need, if you have games or things like this, you actually need, if people really want to learn, you want to get people to induce a purchase in the aisle, you have to have the game be playable. That involves a screen, that involves controllers, that involves piped electricity. And by the way, a lot of aisles at retailers still don't have actual electricity, believe it or not. There's lights overhead, but there's nothing going on underneath the floor for you to plug into. And so if you're going to put in, right, if you're going to go through the effort of putting in some interactive points to showcase the content. Well, you're actually going to need people to be engaging with the interactivity, right? You're going to need people to be playing it, picking up the controllers. In my mind, this is a way of getting the customers themselves to act as your point of purchase display. It's a clever way of drawing people into the store and creating an eyeball capturing event that's going to showcase the product that you're trying to push. Now, I struggle to believe this is a real scalable solution across all the Walmart venues, at least as it's described today. But I think as a pilot program to prove out the proof of point, and by the way, to then it won't be long before we see Saturday morning mom and dad, Street Fighter events to draw the parents in with their kids on the weekend, because believe it or not, that is sort of how these retailers operate. I think this will go to a scalable place over time. And as a pilot, it's interesting. I'm just surprised they had to bother to plug it in with NBC or a broadcaster. I wouldn't think this would be worth that element unless maybe it gives them some advertising lift for the program.
I think it gives them local visibility too, right? Like the NBCs have the local affiliates, and you want those guys talking about it and covering it and broadcasting it and those kinds of things. So there's definitely that local tie-in, which is important, right? Because people aren't going to drive from 500 miles away to go to a Street Fighter tournament. You need that local area around the Walmart.
Will this work on television?
I think so. Locally, yeah, I think it'll work. Street Fighter's just so easy to understand too.
Yeah, and if so, I mean, again,
it depends on the production value.
Yeah.
It depends on a lot of things, right?
But they'll probably get it right. I mean, Walmart's a very well-financed company, and by the way, it's not to organize a 5-on-5 showcase match. That's not particularly hard to do. There's not a lot of technical things that can go wrong.
I kind of like the whole Friday Night Fights esque
Yeah.
offering. I think that's a really smart idea. I think that will cater well, because Friday night, I mean,
It's
in
boxing.
different iterations, yeah, a weekly boxing. I mean, boxing has experienced a surge with DAZN and all these other premium offerings, ESPN Plus, right? We've seen for this kind of content, we have seen the need, and so I feel like we could absolutely see this becoming a success as well.
The thing that I wonder about is, look, fighting games are niche in esports right now. We're not talking about the amazing viewership that Street Fighter V put up over the weekend. And the reason for that, Arda, you were asking watchability versus playability. Fighting games are very, very watchable. I would argue they're one of the least playable esports. They're extraordinarily technical. They're arcane. They're about frame traps and specific sequence timings. They're not fun to play for an inexperienced gamer, particularly if you're up against somebody who's more competitive. And I wonder if just the general headwind against fighting games in esports, it hasn't been an area where we see the innovation and the growth is going to hold back this Walmart program. Whereas if they'd pick, say, a CSGO, we might see something different.
But isn't boxing the most perfect analogy here? It's somewhat niche, right? It's not football, it's boxing. It doesn't have the same audience. And you don't grow up typically boxing, right? Like you might do Little League baseball or Little League football or Little League hockey, but very few people actually grow up training boxing.
Sure.
It's difficult. It's a lot of very technical things. But yet the watching boxing is very compelling, and the whole idea of like a prize fighter and of a champion, and it's very simple. It's one guy, it's one-on-one. I think that's compelling. It's very sort of visceral. It's very animalistic. It appeals to a deeper, more primal side of our humanity, and I don't think that's going anywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it'll work fine as this sort of pilot high-level program, but I think if you tried to scale it to all Walmarts nationally, I have a hard time believing that Street Fighter is going to pack that store the same way a Fortnite or an Apex Legends or a CSGO would.
But it's easier to administer, and I think it's a great first pilot project. I agree with that 100%. Why don't we end it on that? We talked about it a lot this week. If you feel like we missed anything, please tell us on Twitter @BizEsports. Check out thebusinessofesports.com. Paul has links for you prepared every single day so you could be caught up on the day's news and events. Many of those links or those news items we talk about on this podcast, which you can find wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, etc. Please rate, review, and subscribe. When you leave a 5-star rating and a favorable review, it helps others find the podcast as well. You got something to say, William?
Yeah, I just want to say those 5-star ratings really help us as we lay the runway for our IPO. So thanks, guys.
Right. It'll be $475 per share.
We'll do it on podcast downloads in lieu of revenue.
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Business of Esports podcast. Check us out at thebusinessofesports.com and on Twitter at BizEsports.